2016. My name is Ron. I'm chairing this round. And in opening government, we have IIUM A. In OO, we have UiTM EA. Okay. IIUM B. CO, we have codes A. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah. So any will may make it in time? We don't know. Okay. All right. Cool. So on the motion about Facebook giving you opposing views. Social media giving you opposing views, and let's have the first speaker. All right.
Strategy class. The way currently social media operates is it systematically creates an echo chamber around its users. So on Facebook, you have people on your newsfeed that you either interact with regularly or people who have the similar interests and like the same kinds of groups that you do. On Twitter, the section called what you may have missed in the last few hours only always sets up a few people that you regularly interact with and are likely to have similar views. We think that needs to stop. And Facebook and other social media sites need to actively propagate opposing views, be it political, be it social, whatever kinds of views that people may have, and there will be a lot of reasons for that as we progress. So, but I'll break this down into three ideas. First, I'll talk about why is it that we feel that social media sites have an active obligation to be able to provide people with opposing views. Secondly, I will talk about why is it likely that people's mindsets are likely to change and why it's a good thing. And thirdly, just on the trade-off, why we think the trade-off is worth it in terms of getting rid of safe space. So first, in terms of why do we think social media has an obligation? Because first of all, we think the very notion that this might lead to greater social outcomes should be a good enough reason for social media sites to do it, particularly when they want to brand themselves as the liberal kind of like all-encompassing global site for like global corporations of Silicon Valley, right? They want to be inclusive, etc. So we think that's an obligation they have in their own visions and missions of these companies. But secondly, perhaps more importantly, is this whole notion that social media sites themselves has created the situations that amplifies the confirmation biases of people that exist today. So social media sites are complicit in people now having their own views entrenched and re-entrenched over and over again. So yes, pre-social media, people did have their own echo chambers. But the point with social media is you now have access to a wider range of people who have the same views and more, right? So you have more validation of the same ideas that you have, which re-entrenches the kinds of beliefs that people have. The fundamental problem with this is that there is no real choice that people make when they really don't have an opposing view in mind. So people are literally prisoners of the kinds of indoctrination that happens around them. And Facebook validates those kinds of pre-existing beliefs that people have without challenging it. And that's why social media sites have an obligation to kind of try to undo the harms that they have caused as a result of their existence. But thirdly, what I would also tell you is because social media sites have also branded themselves as the kind of the new media of the world, right? So they actively propagate themselves as the alternative sources of information. You don't need to check in and subscribe to The Economist because like Facebook is your source of information as well, and you can have access to information there. So to the extent that they want to go ahead and sell themselves as a source and a hub of information for people, whatever kind of media you call it, to the extent that they do, they must be able to go ahead and make sure the kind of information they provide is also neutral in its behavior. Because, by the way, this also means, right, if I'm liberal, literally the only kind of articles I see are from The Guardian, The Huffington Post. It's never from, like, I can't even name conservative media sites apart from Fox, right? It's never from those kinds of things because I just don't have friends like that, right? So we think, oh, like, very few friends who never get prioritized on my newsfeed. So that's the problem. So secondly, what are these prospective benefits that come out of this? Now, okay, so I think what we've already mentioned is if we are able to change people's minds, that's a good thing, right? Because people are at least choosing from a variety of options of ideas that they can choose from, as opposed to being stuck in the jail cell. That means that they're only having exposure to one idea and never really having a meaningful choice. But even if people don't change their minds, it's a good thing because at least they chose knowing what are the alternatives available to them, right? Obviously, I'm not saying they have zero alternatives on their side. It's a matter of scale, right? We provide more of an option, more of an idea, more exposure to ideas, and better ability to choose. So, but here's the thing. Obviously, I think probably side opposition is going to come up and say, look at Facebook side, look at Facebook comment sections and how fucked up they are. Sorry, live streaming. So look at how messed up they are, right? And that people want to fight over on Facebook, etc. We don't concede that right from the very beginning. The vast majority of these conversations are not likely to be civil. However, that's okay. The thing is that a lot of people don't instantly, even when they fight with someone else, at least the idea gets implanted in their head. And maybe a few months, few days, few years, doesn't matter, somewhere down the line, people use that information to come to conclusions of their own when it's no longer an ego battle. And sometimes they will say, oh, I came to the conclusion of myself without crediting the other person who gave it. And that's fine, right? At least they came to that conclusion. So probably like a good example would be like how I is really, really annoying on Facebook, right? But the fact is he's consistently going ahead and saying really annoying things to people. And people are like making fun of him, everything. But I'll tell you a truth. I realized that some of his views actually resonated with me. Not all of them, but some of them resonated with me later on, much later, when I wasn't having a hostile discussion with him. Sure, at that time I called him an idiot, but later on, I thought of some of those things. And at that time, I was in a hostile environment. But the fact that that conversation happened meant that later on, people have more of an ability to choose. So in the long term, that happens. But on a comparative, here's what happens. People can react to cognitive dissonance in two possible ways. One, they can rationalize what they already have by rejecting new viewpoints, or they can go ahead and, our best case scenario is that they go ahead and absorb those viewpoints. But even in the worst case scenario that they don't, and they kind of like re-entrench on their own beliefs, that's no worse than what side opposition currently has, when people are already re-entrenching their beliefs by validating their ideas more and more. So finally, given that the possibility of people's mindsets changing exists, and people are more likely to be free under their model to be able to choose the kinds of lives they really, really want, what is the trade-off, right? So I think side opposition, probably I might come and say people need safe space, it's really annoying, or in very worse circumstances, it might be very triggering for certain individuals to have opposing viewpoints. And we understand and respect that. But the problem here lies is this. The kinds of ways in which people get triggered are not limited to social media. And I'm not trying to downplay the effects on social media. What I'm saying is in the physical world, it can get much, much, much worse. So we must prioritize the long-term game here. The long-term game must be to go ahead and change the world so in the future, people don't have to go through experiences that make them vulnerable to become triggered to begin with. And if we can play that game, ladies and gentlemen, and I understand some sacrifices and some hits will have to be taken, and that's extremely unfortunate. But the possibility that people might change their minds is something worth fighting for. Because without that, you will always have victims who are more likely to be triggered under your model. You will always have people who are scared of being triggered. You will always necessarily also not be able to change the mindsets of people who may say triggering things, not just on social media, but outside. Social media probably provides one of these fewer avenues when this interaction and discourse can happen, and we must utilize that.
All right, thank you very much. And to continue this round, we'll have the leader of the opposition. And sorry, before we continue, do you consent to the live stream?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hello everyone. We are living in the world with these computers, SDAs, iPhones, Apples, and all those things that are in our hands. So this is why it is important for us to know what we are doing actually by those computer, internets, and all those media social sites. So as a leader of opposition of today, I would like to oppose the motion of the day, which is this House believes that social media sites should prioritize showing users content that holds opposite views to the user, simply because by looking at the disadvantages and bad impacts by showing those things to the person, society, and the whole world. So, as the leader of opposition, I wholeheartedly oppose the motion, as we believe in our arguments, which is I will tell you by my two main argument case, which is first one, the main objective by why we're joining the media social sites in the first place. And the second one, which is by joining those social media sites, which is showing us the opposing views, it affects us psychologically. So now, first of all, let's go to the rebuttal session by what the Prime Minister over there has said to all of us. First of all, they never told us that, what is the opposing views that they are talking about. They are not defined. What is the actually mean by the motion of today, the opposing views that we are actually debating today. So, as the leader of opposition, please, I would like to define what is meant by the opposing views of the motion of today. From the opposition bench, we define the opposing views as the opposite to the views that the particular user want to see in her or his media social sites. So this is how we are really defined by what the whole opposing views to the user itself. And then they never told us, or they never defined us what is they mean by the prioritize showing users content that holds opposing views. So I would like to focus on the word prioritize here. So it means prioritize here, we define as putting those opposing views at the top of each news or updates in the media social sites. So this is what that make their arguments in the first place falls to the ground, ladies and gentlemen. And by that we prioritize in this motion, the debate of today, by putting it at the last post of each media social site. So it means we never gonna make all those opposing views. Is not gonna by putting at those who don't want to look at them. But we really improvise on the word of prioritize here. So please, for that, yes.
Look, it doesn't matter whether the opposing view is political or social or whatever. The fundamental question is, how free are you really to make the decisions that impact your life?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you see that the Prime Minister of the government bench that are saying that people like you and me have no brain to think what is actually meant by opposing views in this particular debate of motion of today. So after done with my rebuttal session, I would like to go with my argument first. And then as my first argument saying about the main objective, why we joining the media social sites in the first place. First of all, we joined the media social site as Facebook, Twitter, and all those things because we want to know the thing that we don't know. We want to know the things that are out of the world. So that's the main objective. So here, but if it is something that opposes the views that we want to in the first place, it is actually jeopardize the whole objective itself. So this is why it is important for us. We have to know the motion of today, which is prioritize itself. So here at leader opposition, I would like to all of you to take a moment and think about the words of prioritize here. And then we are not saying that we should not put those opposing views in that particular content in the media society. So it is important for us to know that we actually know what we want to know first. And after that, yada, 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 and that's that opposing views that we want to know. And then after that, proceed to my second argument of today, which is it affects us psychologically. Why? Why it affects us psychologically, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, if you have, if the opposing views of us is prioritized by putting at the top of our media social sites, it actually affects us psychologically. We don't want to know about that. For example, it's a disturbing videos, naked photos or videos, or leaked naked photos of for example, excuse me, the Kim Kardashians. So it is something that affects us psychology as a student over here. So it is something that is irrelevant for us to know that thing. We want to know about the globalization, the news of today of what happened in Syria, for example. So this is what we meant by prioritize. We should not prioritize showing users that host of reviews to users. So this is important for us to know that it's really affect us psychologically. So as in the case of this little girl that have a Facebook, her Facebook page show that really disturbing videos that make her feel really disturbing and make him have a depression in the early of age. So it is looking at that, it is disadvantages and bad impacts to the world and to the society and the person itself. So do you want your family or your sisters, younger brothers to have this affect psychologically by showing those disturbing videos or photos in the media social site? We don't want that in the first place. So that is why it is important for us to not showing those or to not prioritize those opposing views to the users itself. So what it needs to be proved by the government batch of today is the good that users can get by prioritizing the content of that opposing the views of users. So this is what has to be proved by the government of batch of today. So as a leader of opposition, I'm telling you the case of today by stating those two arguments point, which is first the main objective by joining social media sites in the first place, and the second one how it affects us psychologically if we prioritize those showing or those opposing views to the user. So that's all from me. Thank you. Be prepared.
All right, thank you very much. To continue this round, we have had the Deputy Prime Minister.
I think what happened in Leader of Opposition's speech was that he was very uncomparative to the sort of nuances that Mubarrat gave you. That we acknowledge that sometimes it can be deeply uncomfortable for individuals to see some opposing views. But we acknowledge that the trade-off sometimes is much more worth it, given the fact that when echo chambers perpetuate, it translates into the actions of individuals on the ground, right down to the policies that govern us, which I can assure you is bound to make people feel a lot more sense of discomfort, considering the fact that this sort of sentiment translates into the policies that people have to live through in their everyday lives. Two questions in my speech. Number one, why not going with our policy is harmful, and number two, why our policy is important, right? All of my rebuttals are integrated. I usually come up with better questions. So number one, why this is otherwise harmful. First off, they told us that there was a sense of discomfort that exists within individuals, but I'm going to tell you what usually happens in a world where we allow echo chambers to perpetuate. Not only do you have people constantly confirming the biases that they initially had, as what Mubarrat mentioned, but it's also about how other individuals acknowledge that you are confirming your bias and you do live in vacuums, and they usually end up taking advantage of that. A perfect example of this will be political parties going into like these groups of individuals who they already know have a certain sentiment that they know is uncomparative, has not been engaged, has not been tapped into by the outside world. So what they do is that they fix policies according towards these groups, and a lot of the times within society, as much as we would like to live in our liberal bubble in the debating scene, the majority of individuals out there are much more conservative than the debaters of us in here. What this means is that a lot of the times when these conservatives are allowed to live within their echo chambers and are not pushed into a scenario like using Facebook or Twitter where they get more opposing views to change their mentality, a lot of politicians and a lot of other individuals who make policies try to garner vote and gather support by going into these groups of individuals who exist on the ground, who they know already live in an echo chamber where they live within their own communities and their own homes. On top of that, when you try to go on the internet, they're still living within their own echo chambers as well. There is literally minimal factor of ensuring that these individuals get otherwise information that could actually bring opposing views. This means you would allow more politicians and more harmful individuals to go in and tap into those echo chambers. And the problem with that, as I have mentioned before, is that this manifests into things that become our reality, and that creates a bigger sense of discomfort for individuals on the ground when minorities end up being discriminated. Second question, why our policy is important. There are several levels to this. Number one, I think above and beyond just like allowing yourself to moderate as well and accepting other views, it's also about individuals being more rational in the current beliefs that they have, right? Because usually the sort of beliefs that we have are either due to indoctrination or the pressure of our surroundings. So what does this cost us, right? It has cost us to not ask difficult questions that make our beliefs more rational. And it's not just about the conservatives now having to ask like the difficult questions that they otherwise would have just been complacent about, like why is it absolutely wrong for two people who love each other to be condemned to hell just because they're of the same gender, right? Or even when they believe that like they constantly have to face with articles and posts of individuals who say, really, you say it's harmful, what are the harms? What are the tangible harms? Really? What sort of policies? Because a lot of times, if you know this, these individuals who believe this get away by just saying it's harmful without being faced with like realistic articles or posts of other individuals who tell you and push you into a corner to answer, if you think it's harmful, why is it harmful? And here are the analysis towards it. And it's not just about conservatives, it's also about liberals, right? People who a lot of the times take for advantage, like in first world nations, forget the fact that sometimes there may be some rationale towards individuals who say maybe abortion isn't always okay, or even if a woman believes that sexualization is okay provided that she consented to it, why that is still harmful for society, right? These are the sort of articles and the sort of views that people who are non-liberal also have, and that's why you also see liberals taking it for advantage, right? Wanting to go around into like society and going into even debate tournaments and saying that, oh, if you argue against abortion, it's an equity violation, without realizing that some people actually do validly have these opinions, and you sometimes need to engage with it. And if you believe that abortion is something that's absolutely right, you should be able to confront yourself with those ideas and be able to engage back. Therefore, even if you don't change your mind, you at least answer the loopholes that initially existed within your beliefs. Why is this good? This is good because it not only creates a much more informed choice, but number two, it also, like, let's acknowledge the fact that a lot of times our beliefs, we have to bear the consequences of our beliefs. So the point at which we are better able to answer the loopholes that exist within our beliefs, when we have to bear those consequences, like being called out by other individuals out there, at least you are more reaffirmed and comfortable with the sort of beliefs that you have, because you are not at a loss as to what your actual beliefs really mean. And it's much better for people to reconcile with their being and their self-actualization and what they really think is right. But secondly, the reason why this is important is because it also allows you to still have your initial beliefs, but an evolved version of that. How we allow political and religious views to continuously evolve and continuously make it relevant. Because a lot of the times when we allow these sort of religious sentiments or political sentiments to actually be existing within an echo chamber, and you don't confront yourself with the opposing views are, a lot of the times you are complacent with what it is, and that's all you accept it as, right? In comparison to when you see a plethora of information, you might not agree with everything. You might not disagree with everything. Some issues you're on the fence, but the ability to look at the different information, and because it's presented to you and it's at the top of your news feed, you get to take those information and evolve your beliefs accordingly. And the reason why this is good is because it's not just good for moderation, but it keeps your school of thought relevant. If you're a politician, if you're an individual running an NGO on the ground, wanting to campaign awareness, right? I think that it's really important. It's not my fault, I really feel like it really is much more useful for people on the ground, because you are actually making a lot of your policies that initially started from your beliefs a lot more accurate and a lot more reflective of what society wants. And I think that's what our current society actually needs. Real meaningful change within the campaign awareness that we see. Policies that politicians are fighting for, not for it to just be living in a vacuum and to be outdated or to just serve each other's communities, but to actually help the lives of individuals on the ground. But lastly, I think it pushes individuals to engage in a discourse that becomes more productive. When you are much more used to the idea of confronting with other views continuously, you become more sensitive with the choice of words that you have. Therefore, you make that discussion a lot more progressive and productive as times change. In comparison to, in your world, the only time at minimal the individual will face the opposing view is when they go out and see another person in the mall or in school or at the workplace, right? What this means is that when those opposing views come in, there's a lot more visceral reaction, therefore you don't get that very much productive conversation. At least in our world, we get it out of the way as soon as possible when we normalize the idea of free school, making you a lot more sensitive when you engage into that conversation. And that's how you get meaningful change. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, those meaningful changes can actually bring a lot more comfort and happiness in the lives that we live in right now. Thank you.
All right. Let me invite the deputy leader of opposition. Sorry, someone was using the mail.
Yeah, should I put it side?
No.
You want me to?
Yeah, sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first start by pointing out what the government branch has said. It seems to me that the government never actually explained how can we be assured that the contents that are opposing to what we want to see on social media is actually safe and free from bad intentions. Will there be a system that controls, that filters what we can and cannot see, what is sensitive or not, that will be shown to the users of the internet? So, I would like to say that the people that use the internet do not just consist of individuals that are mature. For example, as adults, we can distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, what we can and what we cannot take in. So think of in our society nowadays, we all know that children also use the internet. I have a little brother who is 9 years old and is using Facebook, and he doesn't even know what he takes in. So let us consider that the fact that children also use the internet. Yes.
It's even better if children face opposing views rather than being continuously indoctrinated by their schools, their community, and their parents.
Excuse me, can you repeat?
It is much better if children face opposing views from an early age so they can decide what they want for themselves, rather than being indoctrinated by their parents, by their schools, and by their communities.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to say that because of the government that never implied how the system is going to control what is actually safe for these children to take in. So how can we know that the sources that come into their brain is not polluted? For example, that is opposing to their beliefs or something that maybe contains violence or pornography that is actually really harmful to them as they are of an really early stage of life. I would like to start my arguments with with saying that prioritizing showing users content that puts opposing views to the users do not benefit economically. We all know how Facebook is now is economically gaining. So how is it by showing users of the social media, users of Facebook, things that they do not want to see? How is that relevant to them trying to, for example, target ads to this audience? If, for example, this company wants to sell cakes, but these cakes advertisements are shown to different targeted audience that are not interested in seeing cakes, for example. So I do not see how that would benefit economically, as we all know how the internet is a really good source of economic flow to the country, to all countries actually. Yes.
Why should I prioritize your sense of comfort if your sense of comfort comes at the expense of the ability for a minority group to self-actualize within society and to not be discriminated by your conservative views that exist in an equal chamber? Why should I prioritize your sense of comfort if your sense of comfort comes at the expense of another minority group now that probably gets discriminated because you never knew how to deal with those minorities and their views?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the opposition team is saying that we can choose what we want to see. So it doesn't mean that everyone that do not want to know what happens to the minorities. Of course, I'm sure there will be a group of people that would really want to help and care for the minorities and their discriminations, for example. So it is not a good thing to say that all of the members of the opposition would like to filter out every aspect of, for example, of discriminations that we are not living in, for example. Okay, I would like to also say how we, as users of the internet, need to control what goes into our brain. We have all the rights to know what we should and what we should not take in. For example, like I said, with the children not knowing how to distinguish between the good and the bad. So it could lead to dangerous things that can happen. For example, teens that can see, for example, news of gun shooting in the US, but staying in Malaysia. But he had nothing to do with the incident. But it gives him an idea of, my friend bullied me at school today. Maybe I should do something to him. It gives him bad ideas, and it should not be implemented in the brains of people at all. This is where I think that a system should be introduced to help filter out what is relevant or not to the society of the internet. So I would like to conclude the opening part by saying that introducing this do not benefit economically, and we should control what goes into our brain. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We move on to the closing half of this round. Can we have the member of the government?
This debate deals with two fundamental topics. Social medias happen to be the biggest opinion-making machine that our civilization has ever encountered. So there remains the question how they should be dealing with it in general, whether there are values and principles they should be defending. That's the first argument we will be providing to you. The second argument that we will be providing to you is the problem regarding values in general and how Facebook and other social medias are distinctly positioned to solve that problem. But before I move into that, so far there have been three things coming from this side. The first class of things says, we should be able to filter out some stuff, and we should be able to filter out bad ideas and things like that. I mean, we already have algorithms to deal with that, we have community guidelines to deal with that, safety guidelines to deal with that, so that's probably not that relevant. But the second question was, but in that case, why should children be exposed to foreign values? And this is where my second argument becomes extremely important. When we tell you, you cannot assign a positive or negative conclusion to a value, but value should be considered by everyone, and there should be equal scope as much as possible. So we don't see why that's a good in of itself. But thirdly, they talk about advertisement and stuff like that. See, that only makes sense if people are going to leave social media and stuff like that. I know it's extremely difficult, and I can tell you that from personal experience. It's virtually impossible. Everyone is there, your friends are there, all your networks are there, every piece of news you receive is there, every piece of communication is probably there, every class group that you're on is probably working there. There's a lot of popularity and stuff like this, so it's impossible that in the near future this will just leave Facebook because now they have a few more articles from Breitbart, which is a conservative news outlet, or maybe conservative people have a few more articles from New York Times. That simply doesn't make sense. So the first and most important question in the debate is, how should these online spaces that have become so powerful be dealing with the question of net neutrality and things like that? So the first thing that has already been established in the debate is the fact that there is massive outrage and things like that. But what hasn't been established is the fact that there is no transparency regarding these things. So these people do act as the largest media conglomerate, but there is no editorial guideline, there is no policy, there is no value that they are defending. So they can simply act like shapeshifters and not hold on to anything and never deal with that question to begin with. And we say that's extremely harmful because all these social medias are so powerful, but they also happen to be very young. We believe this problem is very similar to the problems newspapers were facing, say 150 years ago, when they were on the brink of establishing themselves as the fourth estate, when we realized that newspapers have a disproportionate amount of influence on people, and that's when newspaper editors and owners came up and decided that there are certain values and principles that they have to stick by, and those were the values that the fourth estate came up with. We tell you similarly, all these social medias being so extremely powerful and then having so much outreach means they must recognize the meta principle, and that meta principle must be preservation of net neutrality to the largest extent, and that is extremely important. But the second reason it must also happen is simply because of the fact that these organizations are too big and private. It means that there is no accountability in terms of public. So we tell you there is. So we tell you there is a principal responsibility as far as these social media outlets go to make sure that they maximize net neutrality. Not take a position that doesn't affect net neutrality, but take a position that amplifies net neutrality to the largest possible extent. So that's the second reason why Facebook and other social medias should be taking a very strict position, right? But the third reason they should also be taking a very strict position is because we tell you there is this scope to tackle a moral imperative. What do we mean? You look at countries like Saudi, you look at countries like India, you look at countries like Brazil, which often don't have access to a lot of alternative opinions. In these countries, for people, probably the biggest scope of access to alternative opinion happens to be social media. These are the countries from which these social medias have the largest number of user bases. These people engage with these social medias extensively. It means that they're in a very strategic position to affect these people, at least give them an alternative worldview that they simply do not have. And we tell you the ability that the fact that social media have an ability to do that gives them a moral imperative to also perform that task, right? But finally, this debate is also about how these online spaces should be navigating with the questions of values. So they have to identify that there's a fundamental problem with how values work. It's always a binary. It's either you keep solidifying whatever you believe, or you're in a state where you're willing to change what you believe. So the point at which we recognize that it's best if people are willing to change and question their beliefs consistently versus solidifying whatever they believe consistently. The point at which these media take a strict position to provide as much diverse views as possible. We tell you they facilitate that core principle, and that is extremely important because it mitigates the possibility of any sort of monopoly of values or things like that. But why is the question of values then? This is the second question in the debate. Why is the question of values so extremely important? Because we tell you because you can't say whether values are right or wrong to the largest, at least in most cases, right? Because every value has sides that are, maybe every value doesn't have to be right or wrong, but the point is every value is worth considering. And that is extremely important. What I mean by that is often things you shun as not me are things that are very much worth considering. So you read the Republican literature, for example, you realize they defend principles like small government, they defend principles like federalism, they defend principles like rewarding those who generate wealth because they generate wealth, rewarding people with personal spaces, and rewarding people with the right to have faith and happiness retained and things like that. These are often views that the liberals would categorically shun. But when you look at these values, you realize there is nothing wrong with these values per se. So these social medias must take a position where people are able to be exposed to these values, and this is extremely important because in a world that's increasingly intolerant, these companies are in a position to expose people to a maximum spectrum of views. That changes how people live their everyday life. This means that a white person who has no reason to be exposed to anything that would make that person sympathetic towards black pleas and black problems is suddenly exposed to articles that talk about the new Jim Crow, articles that talk about the new range of suffering, articles that talk about faith-based communities that are trying to solve these problems. These are all other sides and other views that you as a white individual don't have any reason or scope to be exposed to, right? And that is extremely important. It means that suddenly everyone else and every other problem is no longer an other and a problem. Rather, these are things that are humanized to you. Rather, these are things that you're more tolerant about. Rather, your first impression changes. When you look at these people, your first impression is no longer hate, but at the very least, your first impression is a second thought, is consideration. Maybe the best case scenario is when you change your views. So this debate deals with two fundamental questions. How should we as a species be dealing with the question of values? And we tell you the nerds are our saviors. But it's also about the fact that social media are so extremely powerful, they can no longer not take a principle. It's time to identify with a meta principle, and this is it.
Sorry, sorry.
Cool. Yeah, now we have an extension from the off. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the opposing team disagrees that social media sites should not prioritize showing users contents that holds opposing views to the user. Firstly, the points that I'm going to convey to the public now, to the floor, is the duties of social media and also in the netizens' perspective. Firstly, before I convey my substantives, I will start with the rebuttals in the government side. For the opponent government, giving points like active obligation to the opposing view, changing their mass and also a trade-off. So my rebuttals would be active obligation to opposing view. It is not the case, meaning that the user have the choice to choose the content that they want to subscribe into. So enforcing the contents of your own individual views towards others is simply reaching the right of a human right to choose what they want to believe, to choose what they want to pursue. Okay, next would be change their minds. Alternatives. In terms of changing their mind, violence is never the answer to any dilemma in this world. Therefore, by imposing these views, these opposing views onto people, this is an aggressive action that will bring upon greater retaliation in response. Yes.
How are people really choosing what they want to see if they don't even know what the opposite to what they want to see is?
Thank you very much. Choosing does not mean that you have to give options. Meaning that choosing can be you find your own options, you find your own beliefs. Therefore, if you are imposing your opposite views to others, it might have a negative effect. Meaning if someone is not ready to accept these views, they might turn into a hate speech and bring greater hatred and also negative effects into the floor. Next would be the opponent government said that children are likely to are better to be exposed to opposing ideas from an early stage. Children are small entities that are not mature enough to make maybe a lot of sound decisions. That is why there is need of a parental guidance. That is why, for example, children opening bank accounts must be under a parental guidance or a guardian guidance. And also children are not able to vote, meaning that this shows that they are not able to do the correct or sound decisions in their own, and they are very, very sensitive to changes in the environment. Moving on. Opposing your idea of computer and invoking the right to choose what you want to see. Like I said before, this is the breaching the rights to choose what they believe in. Therefore, you are not just imposing the idea. The government's questioning that you are imposing the idea of minorities to majorities, but they don't realize is that the opposite can also happen, imposing the ideas of the majorities to the minorities, and also making the minorities' ideas more irrelevant than the current situation imposes. Next, moving on to the closing government, aggressive stand and action. This is the stance that the government is taking is an aggressive stance and action. Therefore, like I said before, a greater retaliation might occur, and negative retaliation in specific, meaning that they can start with spreading hatred in the social media onto from just spread hatred, they will go into hate speeches, and ultimately, hate actions would be taken. For example, stereotyping a type of group, minorities, like we want to pass tested. For example, stereotyping a Muslim around the world as terrorists, stereotyping feminists as hating all men in the world. That is such wrong motions. Therefore, and these motions are taken into account into account in the real world, as we see hate actions are coming in from everywhere, from France, from England, especially from the Brexit community.
Don't you think
all powerful news media outlets have an editorial team that make sure that conservatives and liberals are more or less equally represented? It's because they're really powerful. Social medias are also really powerful. Why shouldn't they extend to that principle?
I will explain further during my point, which is the responsibility of social media itself. Okay, now moving on to the points. Why do we impose the motion? Because more harm than good will come of this action that starts with hate and evolves into something more gruesome, but like I said before, hate speech, hate crime, and protest. Therefore, I'll start with my first point, the duties of social media. The duties on social media can be categorized into three main aspects, which is communication, unity, and also entertainment. Social media is the largest communication channel in the world currently, and therefore, as a social media provider, we want a healthy communication. We want to spread peace. We don't want to spread hatred towards the world. Therefore, a healthy communication would be an ideal job and will be the responsibility of the social media provider. Next, unity. Social media community is borderless. It does not consist of any country. It does not consist of any religion or race. It consists of all of it. Therefore, the responsibility of the social media will be wider. Therefore, the responsibility is bigger. They have to promote more unity between countries, and therefore, and also between religion and also between race. But by opposing these negative ideas onto them, it might have a negative effect. The unity may be inside the country or outside the country, between a race or between religion would be worse. For example, if they spread, like for example, religious is a sensitive issue, for example. There are taboos, there are norms that must not, there are norms that are sensitive to religion. Therefore, if you impose this sensitivity, we are not sensitive enough to care for other religions, therefore such hatred will soon be spread. Lastly, what netizens' perspective. I will talk about the mask identity, not revealing one's true self in the media. Therefore, they are just saying anything, and also they are not thinking of other people when they are talking. Therefore,
all right, then we have a good speech from the government.
In order for us to have a more tolerant society that is more accepting of others, we need to be exposed to new ideas and new ways of thinking, right? We believe our proposal on the other side actually does that. I have two issues in my speech, but before I move on to the issues in today's debate, a couple of rebuttals that doesn't necessarily fit in, right? From the very get-go, they were talking about how children will be exposed to these things. I don't think the opening gave much credit to the argument. I'll give reasons why. Even this is not. I'll give you reasons why children wouldn't be exposed to these harmful things. Firstly, because if you are talking about parental guidance, these parents can actually control what these children go and see on Facebook, can block Facebook or other social media sites from happening. They also can control what kind of things these children see. Like these sort of random things already exist, right? So we don't think that's a problem that exists. Then they were talking about hate speech, and people might be seeing all these sort of things, or might be seeing a video that they necessarily don't want to see, right? If it's a really bloody video, before the video comes, there's already a disclaimer, so people can choose not to watch it if it's like that triggering. We don't think like even if it is triggering, we think it's fine for us to put it in the newsfeed so that the person would have a choice to actually do that particular view, right? Secondly, they said they want people to have like the purpose of social media is for people to communicate or have entertainment, something like that, coming from both, right? We think people will still be able to communicate. Shitab already told you that this social media is too big and people wouldn't necessarily go out of it because like all your friends are there, so they will still be able to communicate even if these news are there. In terms of entertainment, I think entertainment would be better on our side if they think the whole purpose of social media is entertainment, because you are exposed to a variety of musicians or movies or whatnot. You wouldn't necessarily be exposed to, because like these are not things you necessarily know, right? Moving on to the issues in today's video, right? Why should the greatest imperative for these social media sites to be is to create net neutrality, right? Shitab already came here and told you that like this is like in this new age, like we actually have an opportunity to create a neutral media, right? You have all these sort of medias. Maybe there's some sort of representation in economists where they have a couple of like socialist people writing on their magazine, but we have an opportunity like with social media to actually have views of all these different parties and actually to have a neutral media, a media that is actually truly neutral for the first time, right? We think this is where we are engaging with their arguments saying, oh, this is something that is going to harm the social media sites, right? We don't think this is going to necessarily harm the social media sites, because firstly, people wouldn't exist these social media sites, and if liberal people are exposed to conservative sites, this necessarily means that people who don't actually go and post next on Facebook now will actually go and post next, because liberals will also be able to see like conservative ideologies, and this is like a platform for them to get more revenue, right? So we think they will now be able to get money from both sides, and we think Facebook or other social media sites have a greater imperative now, is because they are so big and they are so powerful that they are the only agent that will actually be able to have such a neutral media, right? Because like in the near future, we don't see anyone going and challenging the hierarchy of social media and creating something else and saying, oh, this is the new media, right? So we think this is the reason why Facebook or the social media should try to create a more neutral platform that we can have this sort of discourse, right? This argument, this extension coming from Shitab was not rebutted by the member of opposition, right? Moving to the second issue.
So,
Sure.
you said that children won't be easily exposed. Do you know that Facebook must be 13 years old for a student to use it? It must be at least 13 years old. But why are children less than that, 12, 10, and 9 also able to use so? Therefore, parental guidance is not.
9-year-old can go and watch porn. It's not the fault of the sites that they can do it. It's your parents' fault. It's your guardian's fault. It doesn't really make sense. Like Facebook can make all these algorithms, but if you really want to watch something that is harmful for you, you can still do it, right? But on the outside, it's better because okay, the child is really bad child, wants to watch porn, but we'll have all these religious views also coming in because they are opposing views, right? So it's better on the outside. Moving to the second issue, right? Can it play a fundamental role in changing the perspectives of people, right? We told you that developing nations is extremely hard for people like NGOs or like minority parties or minority newspapers to actually get their views to the political, to the main political discourse, right? This is the exclusive material coming from Shitab where we call like the most number of people who are in social media people in countries like India or Brazil, but these people are always exposed to the conservative ideologies that is coming from the main two parties. They don't have the exposure to the minority parties or minority newspapers. Sure, minorities newspapers will exist on their side, they can still post articles, people will still read it. But under our side, we force people to think or we force people to read these things or at least see these things, right? We think this is something that is good. Firstly, because we think minority people will at least, even if they don't understand, people will at least think about the plight of the minorities and what are the kind of struggles that these minorities go through. Secondly, we think they will be exposed to newer ideas that they may necessarily think should be their political platform, right? It wouldn't be about two main media or two main ideas floating. Like people we'll have an opportunity to think, oh, there's a third way. There are so many smaller minority newspapers or minority groups that can actually largely form a third party or things like that, right? We think these are things, exclusive benefits that we can bring to our side, where we will be able to give a larger voice to the minority. We think in a political discourse, minorities are extremely important, and our side, when the majority is forced to read the views of minority or views that they don't agree with, this is how we will have a more tolerant society, or a society that is more democratic or more inclusive, right? Moving to the last part, right? We don't, of why we don't think values are necessarily something that is good, or values are something that is not necessarily bad, right? We think, like, oftentimes as debaters, we think we are so liberal, and we think all conservatives like lower taxation is something that is so bad, like all these sort of things are there, right? We are not challenged in our liberal bubble. We'll always go and bash in these conservative people. Oh, these conservatives always want to have lower taxes, they are taking our welfare from us. We never actually think from the perspective of them, because we are not exposed to their ideas, we're not exposed to most of their authors. So that means we will have like this sort of friction between the two sides, and we won't be challenging each other, right? We think the point at which our ideas are challenged by more like opinions coming from conservative ideologies, this is the point in which we'll be able to have a more tolerant society. Because maybe at first we won't be able to understand the ideas that are coming from the other side. Maybe we'll just fight with these people. But the point at which we are exposed to these ideas, maybe we'll compromise and take some part from the conservative ideology, right? We may think a small government is something that is necessarily good. This is the exclusive material coming from Shitab that is again rebutted, right? So what have we told you today? We've told you that why Facebook, also other social medias, are in an exclusive position to actually create a neutral media, and why this is something that is extremely beneficial, and how we will be able to change the ideologies in developing countries and benefit the minorities. All these things. All
right, and to end round one, we'll have the opposition list.
Alright, I think at the end of the day, both sides of the houses, we agree on one thing, is we wanted a disclosed idea. But what is the difference between both sides is that we wanted, for their side, they wanted a very harsh, very aggressive disclosed idea. But for us, we wanted a healthy and peace way of disclosing idea. Now, let's start with a few rebuttals. First of all, like from their side, they came out by saying that, they made it sound like the current social media is seemingly has been very, it's currently already very liberal but the thing is, from our side, we think that in the current status quo, there are controls on social media. They do exist, and the thing is that if someone on your Facebook or your Twitter has an opinion that's against you, that is just makes you uncomfortable, you can actually go and report and trigger them. And the thing is, like these opinions are actually most of the time they will be very aggressive because they are very raw ideas. Now, then I'm gonna move on to tell you about how is it that these opinions are very raw and very aggressive. Now, other than that, they wanted to say that it seems like we are actually sacrificing the minorities' feeling and their rights for our own comfort. But actually, no. The thing is, for us, we think that there is actually a lot of discourse that is actually happening in daily lives, on platforms like TV, on platforms like talks and all that. And same thing goes, and we think that this. Now I'm gonna bring it and tell you what's an opinion on the internet. See, let's talk about this opinion, opposing views on the internet, right? And the thing is, sometimes whenever a person is actually on the internet, he or she feels like they are in a very safe mask in a very safe place, safe haven. Why is that so? Actually, as my speaker has already mentioned, it's not that whenever these that people are using it, they feel like they're actually under a mask identity. Why is that so? Because on internet, social medias and all that, they don't make it compulsory for you to put your real name. You can actually hide your true self. And whenever you feel like, hey, you know what? They won't know who is this, I don't know, Hello Kitty 81 person who was spreading hate on the black people. They wouldn't know because my real name is not there. And okay, and what they do is, okay, once I feel like, oh, you know, I'm under this Hello Kitty 81 mask, I can say anything I want. I can throw in a very harsh idea. And the thing is, what does this very harsh idea do? And this harsh idea are too aggressive. From my side, this kind of aggressive ideas might actually hurt someone who is not ready, which is what they have not really engaged in the debate. And the thing is, what does it do? For someone who is not ready to accept this kind of idea, that they will actually think that, hey, why do you think like that? They will think that this idea, they might actually be easily misunderstood these ideas and then buy onto the wrong narrative, and thus leading to more hatred towards the ones who have opposing views as them. Alright, now moving on. No, sit down please. Now moving on to that, I'm going to tell you about why, I'm going to emphasize on why is it that what are the duties of social media as my speaker has mentioned just now, which is about the communication and unity. Then again, we think that as far as it is right now, the social media is actually creating a very neutral enough platform for the people to disclose their ideas. Because the thing is, we think that if social media starts very prioritizing on actually showing this kind of very aggressive ideas, very opposing view, it is gonna make people feel very discomfort, and thus, as I said, just not leading to a lot of misunderstanding and also a lot of retaliation that's gonna happen, which is actually mentioned by this first speaker just now. Now, I'm gonna tell you about harm minimization right now. See, from our side, you know, what we wanted is like, the thing is, from what I see just now, the thing is, there's already a lot of platform in the daily life which provides this kind of disclose of opposing idea, which is and what is the difference? And what the thing is that when actually in daily life when you do it, your identity isn't really masked. You know, when I'm doing it in front of you. And when I'm actually talking about how I might not like certain racial group in front of you. It means that I will have to I have to use a very neutral word. I would have to take care of it, because think of my image, because I might be directly I might be misunderstood, or I might be directly hurt by people who are against me. And from the other side is that they wanted like a lot of social media fights happening. One is that like what I said just now, like identity is masked. You can say whatever you want, and like for people who like they feel like, hey, you know, I don't feel comfortable with this kind of aggressive aggressive opinion that's going on. They feel like you know what, the social media does not take care of what is going on for them, and they would feel very angry towards people. And now let's talk about the good-looking one.
Matt, the fact that physical interaction is not mutually exclusive. Don't you think Hello Kitty 1 helps us normalize our ability to answer those questions, so that when we face it in the physical world, the visceral reaction is less likely to happen?
No, we think that from our side we think that yes, but the thing is, as I said just now, Hello Kitty 81 might give you a very biased opinion, which will actually hurt you more. And the thing is, when it actually creates hatred. Before, let's say if you actually ask me the same question about racial in real life, before I started, you would actually have a lot of biases on me, a lot of hatred towards me before I even start, and you can't really maintain a neutral ground before having a very intellectual discourse. Now, let's look at the worst and best case scenario from both sides. From the gut side, you know, what they think is that, you know, at the end of the day, somehow some minor people on the internet are gonna like come to a neutral conclusion after like months and months of like thinking. And for worse, and from our side, the best case scenario is that we have a very healthy discourse because of how is it that the identity is shown and then more neutral is shown, is used, and there's actually an active and responsible discussion happening. And for that, the worst case scenario would be like a lot of fight happening and a lot of hatred and misunderstanding and harsh comments happening would lead to a lot of chaos. And for us, it is actually a slow change, which is actually better for the people because of how is it that you might have a better platform. And for us, we're willing to trade off a lot of provoking and a very harsh change for a healthy discourse. And time follows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please cross floor, shake hands. Wait outside. Don't go very far. Just wait outside the door. Don't go very far, okay? Thank you.
It's